Welcome to a place where family bonds are never what they seem, and every smile hides a story waiting to shatter. Here, childhood laughter twists into bitter rivalries, where pride and jealousy burn hotter than love. Step inside the lawyer's office where wills aren't just read. They explode, tearing down illusions and revealing secrets no one dared whisper aloud. Watch as a father's masterstroke of justice turns arrogance into downfall, and inheritance transforms from mere wealth into a test of loyalty, sacrifice, and betrayal. This is where hidden truths claw their way to the surface, where husbands carry secrets darker than any brother's greed, and where fate itself delivers the cruelest revenge. Every story will pull you deeper, leaving you breathless with every twist of destiny. Stay with us, because here, nothing is as simple as family. A brother's arrogant laughter carried through the room, sharp and mocking, louder even than the silence of mourning. While the weight of losing a father pressed heavily, he stood with a smug smile, boasting to anyone who would listen that the house, the business, and every cent left behind would soon belong to him. His voice dripped with confidence, as if destiny itself had already signed the papers in his favor. Each word stabbed like a knife, not only because of his greed, but because it stripped away the fragile illusion of family unity that once existed. The arrogance was nothing new. For years, whispers of favoritism surrounded him, and he wore them like a crown. He believed himself untouchable, convinced that charm and manipulation would shield him from consequences. Yet beneath the surface, hidden betrayals simmered. There were deals made in secret, debts cloaked in shadows, and a lifestyle built on lies that no one dared confront. Pride made him blind, certain no one could uncover the truth he so carefully buried. But grief has a way of tearing down walls. In the quiet moments after the funeral, conversations revealed cracks in his perfect facade. Friends spoke of unpaid loans, business partners hinted at questionable choices, and whispers surfaced about how money meant for the family business had funded a life of indulgence. Every smug laugh became a reminder of what he had stolen, not earned. What he didn't know was how much more would come undone. The man who had mocked the inheritance so boldly was hiding secrets of his own, and one of them was buried in a marriage built on lies. His wife's eyes no longer carried devotion, but something colder, knowledge. She had discovered more than just infidelity. There were hidden accounts, betrayals that went far beyond the family, and truths about loyalty that would destroy him when revealed. Each time he bragged about the house or the business, the weight of his deceit grew heavier. The family's silence wasn't submission, it was patience. The kind of patience that waits for the perfect moment when arrogance becomes downfall. The lawyer's reading was drawing near, and with it came the promise that justice, carefully woven into a father's final words, would silence the mockery forever. In that moment, as laughter filled the air, no one stopped him. No one reminded him of humility. The sound of his gloating became his undoing, a performance of pride played before those who knew the truth would soon break him. He thought the inheritance was his destiny. He didn't realize it was his trap, and when the lawyer spoke, arrogance met silence. Childhood memories should have been a comfort, warm reminders of nights spent laughing around the dinner table, and the security of a father's presence guiding every step. Instead, those memories became a haunting contrast to what followed. The unity once held together by blood slowly unraveled into rivalries so sharp they cut deeper than any stranger ever could. Behind every smile at those family dinners, pride and jealousy simmered, concealed beneath polite conversation and carefully measured glances. The brother who once shared secrets in hushed voices under the covers had grown into a man whose every word dripped with superiority. His arrogance wasn't just about the inheritance he flaunted. It was woven into the very fabric of how he looked at the family, as though they were stepping stones placed for his rise. Every family gathering became a stage where he paraded his imagined victories, while others were expected to applaud. The bitterness turned those dinners into silent battlegrounds, where resentment festered under forced laughter and clenched jaws. The betrayal was not only in the way he mocked what wasn't yet his, but also in the choices he made that no one dared speak of aloud. Money had been siphoned from the family business in ways that were never accounted for, and whispers grew of questionable women and secret debts. His wife, once radiant in her devotion, had become withdrawn, her eyes carrying a darkness that betrayed her silence. She knew more than she let on, and that knowledge was a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. The rivalry wasn't only between siblings. It seeped into marriages, poisoning trust. Discovering that the very man meant to protect and cherish had instead woven lies of his own only deepened the wounds. Hidden accounts came to light, and late night calls became impossible to ignore. The husband, the one who promised loyalty, had secrets entangled with the brother's arrogance, and the weight of that truth shattered the fragile image of family. Pride and deceit were not limited to one man. They had spread like rot through the very foundation of what once seemed unbreakable. Those dinners became unbearable charades, where betrayal sat at the table like an uninvited guest no one dared to confront. Smiles hid the cracks, but the silence screamed louder than any accusation. Every bite of food carried the taste of unspoken rage. Every toast to family felt like a cruel joke. The rivalry grew, not just for wealth or the business, but for dignity, for the chance to expose truth and reclaim what had been stolen in silence. The bitter rivalries that replaced unity were more than sibling squabbles. They were scars carved by betrayal, sharpened by greed, and deepened by the lies of a husband whose loyalty was nothing but an illusion. The lawyer's words would not only divide inheritance, but uncover every secret that had been buried beneath those forced smiles. The day of the will's reading carried a heaviness that silence could not disguise. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and cold paper, yet beneath its formality lingered tension so sharp it could slice through the air. What should have been a solemn formality turned into a battlefield where words became weapons and every truth unearthed felt like a wound reopened. The brother walked in with arrogance carved across his face, convinced the house, the business, and the legacy were already his. He leaned back in his chair as if the outcome were a foregone conclusion, smirking at anyone who dared meet his gaze. But when the lawyer began to speak, the air shifted. The will was not written for the greedy or the proud. It was crafted with precision, a final act of a father who had known more than he ever revealed. Each line read unraveled a new revelation. The house wasn't going to the one who mocked so loudly, nor was the business his prize. Instead, conditions were laid bare, exposing every flaw in his carefully curated image. Years of betrayal and selfishness had not gone unnoticed, and the inheritance reflected justice rather than favoritism. What he thought belonged solely to him was divided in ways that mirrored loyalty, sacrifice, and truths he had ignored. The lawyer's voice grew heavier as sealed documents were presented, evidence of debts hidden in shadows and loans never repaid. Business partners had spoken, records were gathered, and every selfish indulgence had been catalogued. The confident brother's face drained of color as the mask he wore crumbled. The inheritance wasn't a crown. It was a mirror reflecting his corruption, but the secrets didn't end with him. In the middle of the reading, another truth clawed its way into the light, one far more personal and devastating. Papers revealed hidden transactions tied not only to the brother, but to a husband who had sworn loyalty at home while betraying it in silence. Accounts traced back to his name, showing that choices made in secrecy had bled into the family's fortune. What was once dismissed as paranoia became undeniable fact. The betrayal was no longer whispered. It was written in ink, stamped and sealed. The room grew heavy with shock. Eyes darted, voices rose, but the lawyer pressed on, each revelation landing like a hammer against fragile glass. The brother sat frozen, his arrogance dissolved, while the truth about the man meant to protect and cherish cut deeper than any words could describe. Every sentence spoken exposed another layer of deceit, another betrayal hiding behind polite smiles and false promises. By the time the final page was read, no one looked the same. The family that walked in fractured walked out shattered. The will had not simply divided wealth. It had exposed betrayal, stripped pride, and laid bare the lies that had poisoned love and loyalty for years. The lawyer closed the folder, and silence claimed the room. The will revealed itself like a puzzle, every piece carefully placed by a father who had seen more than anyone realized. For years, the arrogant brother carried himself as though everything was promised to him: the house, the business, the respect of the family. He mocked, boasted, and fed on the belief that he was the favored one. Yet when the lawyer unfolded the pages, what appeared wasn't favoritism. It was justice, crafted so intricately that every ounce of his greed became the very rope tightening around his neck. The conditions were unlike anything expected. The house would remain in the family, but only for those who could preserve its honor. The business, though thriving, would not go to the one who had treated it as a personal toy. Instead, it was safeguarded under terms that demanded responsibility and accountability, qualities the arrogant brother had never shown. Every stipulation felt like a trap designed for him alone, as though a father had foreseen the arrogance and greed that would come spilling out the moment he passed. The brother's smirk faded line by line, his certainty collapsing under the weight of truths laid bare. Documents exposed debts, betrayals, and choices he thought buried. What he believed would crown him king of the family legacy turned into shackles, binding him to his own corruption. It was a masterstroke, not of cruelty but of wisdom, ensuring that arrogance would never inherit power it could only destroy. But the unraveling didn't stop there. Hidden within the records were connections no one had expected. Transactions linked to the brother bled into the life of a husband who had sworn loyalty at home while hiding secrets in shadows. The accounts traced patterns that could no longer be denied, exposing not only betrayal within the business, but betrayal within the marriage itself. The shock was heavier than any loss, a revelation that the man trusted most had conspired in silence, his greed intertwined with another's arrogance. The lawyer read on, steady and unflinching, while every word cracked open wounds that had been festering for years. What was once pride and family unity turned into shame. What was once love became suspicion. The father's plan had not only been to divide assets, it had been to reveal truth, to pull back the curtain on every hidden betrayal that would have destroyed the family quietly had it not been dragged into the light. The arrogant brother sat in silence, choking on the justice he never saw coming, his greed exposed for all to witness. And in that silence, the betrayal of a husband burned even deeper, leaving scars that no inheritance could ever heal. The masterstroke of justice was complete. Inheritance was never only about numbers on paper or keys to a house. It became the measure of everything unspoken. The loyalty offered without recognition, the sacrifices made in silence, and the quiet love that often went unseen while deceit was celebrated as power. When the lawyer revealed the true heart of the will, it became clear that wealth had merely been the stage. What mattered most was the truth of who had stood by with integrity and who had chosen betrayal. The arrogant brother, so sure the business and property belonged to him, listened as conditions unraveled every illusion he had created. The inheritance was not a gift of riches, but a reflection of character, a mirror showing years of greed, dishonesty, and pride. While he laughed in the days after the funeral, boasting that everything would fall into his lap, the will spoke differently. It rewarded devotion, patience, and responsibility, not arrogance. For the first time, his pride worked against him, turning his entitlement into humiliation. Each line of the document carried the weight of a father's foresight. Those who had given quietly, those who had endured without recognition, found themselves entrusted with more than money. They inherited dignity, legacy, and responsibility. For the brother who had taken and lied, there was nothing but disappointment. It was justice hidden in plain sight, disguised not as punishment, but as the truth of what loyalty deserves. But the will revealed more than financial reckoning. Tucked inside its conditions were documents that tied betrayal far closer to home than anyone had expected. Transactions and hidden accounts showed a trail that reached not only through the brother's recklessness, but into a husband's secrecy. What was thought to be marital loyalty was instead deception, where funds meant for stability had been siphoned for indulgence and betrayal. His silence at home had been louder than any words, and when the evidence surfaced, it was impossible to deny. The realization struck harder than any blow. While the brother's arrogance was expected, the husband's betrayal carried the sting of intimacy turned to ashes. The inheritance became a measure not just of family loyalty, but of love corrupted, exposing how deceit can thrive in the very place it should never exist. It was no longer about money or property. It was about uncovering the truth of who valued family, who respected vows, and who turned trust into a weapon. The lawyer's voice did not shake, but the room did. Each revelation stripped away another layer of falsehood, until nothing remained but the raw truth of sacrifice overshadowed by betrayal. The inheritance had become more than wealth. It was judgment, justice, and the final voice of a father who had seen it all and chosen to speak from the grave. And in that moment, the weight of silent love proved stronger than the loudest deceit. The lawyer's voice carried no emotion, but every word landed like a strike. What had begun with arrogant laughter quickly dissolved into suffocating silence. The brother who mocked so freely sat frozen, his certainty replaced with disbelief. The house he claimed, the business he boasted about, the wealth he thought belonged to him, all slipped from his grasp with each clause revealed. The mockery that once echoed in every corner of the family now sounded like a distant memory, swallowed whole by the weight of undeniable truth. The will did more than divide property. It exposed every secret hidden behind years of forced smiles and quiet betrayals. Records of debts long concealed, deals struck in the shadows, and choices made with selfish intent unfolded in front of everyone. The arrogant laughter that had filled the days after the funeral was silenced, not by anger or confrontation, but by fate itself, delivered through the words of a father who had prepared for this moment long before his death. The silence was thick, but the revelations did not end there. Among the carefully presented documents, connections surfaced that tied betrayal deeper into the family than anyone had anticipated. Accounts showed money siphoned not only by the brother, but through the hands of a husband who had promised loyalty at home while weaving deceit in secret. His role in the shadows stood uncovered, laid bare by ink and numbers that could not be denied. The betrayal that cut the deepest wasn't the greed of a brother, but the lies of a man who was supposed to protect, not destroy. The air grew heavier with each revelation, as if fate itself was orchestrating a reckoning no one could escape. What had been mockery turned into shame. What had been silence turned into realization. Every twist revealed by the lawyer's steady voice rewrote the story of the family, exposing not just greed, but disloyalty in its rawest form. There was no need for rage, no outburst of fury. The revenge lay in the quiet power of truth, in watching arrogance crumble and betrayal choke on its own lies. The father's will had become a final act of justice, one that stripped away every mask and forced the guilty to face what they had tried to bury. The brother's pride collapsed under the weight of conditions he could never meet, and the husband's betrayal hung in the air, poisoning the room with a truth that could never be unlearned. By the time the lawyer closed the folder, the family was no longer the same. Fate had carved its judgment, cruel in its precision, merciless in its justice. Mockery was silenced, arrogance destroyed, and betrayal exposed, leaving nothing but the raw truth that could never be hidden again. What begins with arrogant laughter always ends with silence, when fate unmasks the lies no one expected. The stories you've witnessed here are more than dramas. They're revelations of betrayal, loyalty, and the justice that only destiny can deliver. Families once bound by love fall apart under the weight of secrets, and the truth hidden behind forced smiles always finds its way to the light. Arrogant brothers, deceiving husbands, carefully crafted wills. Each twist leaves scars you can't forget. If you were pulled into the raw emotions, the shocking betrayals, and the unforgettable family reckonings shared today, don't walk away just yet. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story where destiny delivers its revenge. Stay connected, because every ending here is only the beginning of another secret waiting to be revealed.